Ah, vacation. Americans out in nature, doing American things. Camping, eating s'mores, being at one with nature. But how did vacation begin? What exactly is the history of summer vacation? Well, it all began on April 1st, 1869. A few months earlier, a young preacher named Bill Murray had begun a series of speeches in Boston. This young man spoke of the natural beauty sitting untouched in the nearby Adirondack Mountains, describing it as magnificent scenery which makes the wilderness a rival to Switzerland. And it was in these speeches that Murray suggested something revolutionary, the notion that a trip to nature could be done for fun. In other words, vacation. Most Americans thought of nature as an obstacle, as a thing to be overpowered. Indeed, 1869 marks the same year as the first transcontinental railroad. But with Murray's book, Adventures in Wilderness, fishing and hiking were transformed into antidotes for the unnatural urban life. Though America did not become 50% urban until 1920, large cities like New York had already passed 500,000 by 1869. Air pollutants, poor nutrition, and lack of exercise were on the minds of many people, including Europeans. The idea of vacating the city had been known in Europe since the Romantic era, but America had not followed suit. But after the U.S. went through its Industrial Revolution, and let's not forget its Civil War, Murray's book found a large audience among exhausted city dwellers. Readers enjoyed the idea of pure life in the Adirondacks, with emerald-covered lakes that gleamed like jewels, viewing it as the perfect response to disease-infested cities full of unhappy citizens. Murray noted that a new train line could transport one from the city to nature within 36 hours, resulting in 10 editions of his book within its first 4 months. The summer of '69 in upstate New York. We think of free love and mud and Jimi Hendrix. But this was a different '69, 1869. Aspiring travelers, eager beavers, were called Murray's Rush by newspapers, and all flocked to the Adirondacks with a copy of Adventures in the Wilderness gripped in their hands. One historian noted that it was a human stampede, which more or less flew in the face of Murray's claim about the area. Unfortunately, for these new visitors, 1869 was just about the wettest and coldest summer in Adirondack history. City dwellers were dangerously unprepared. They used canoes as shelter from the rain. They ran from bear poop. The mosquitoes were so abysmal that year due to the late rains. The handful of inns throughout the area, which were built for a small number of hunters, grew overwhelmed. One hotel charged patrons hourly to sleep on the pool table. Locals profited as guides for all these urbanites, but they had no experience, resulting in getting lost and sleeping in foul swamps. Newspapers cemented this early history of summer vacation by labeling these travelers as Murray's Fools. The book, it should be noted, came close to April 1st. The author was ridiculed by angry, frustrated, and disappointed travelers. They claimed he embellished the glamour of nature. Still, others worried that the woods were becoming far too diverse. A well-known writer of the time, Thomas Bangs Thorpe, described Murray as the murderer of helpless invalids, that he had ruined the summers of countless city folks. Still, others complained about the shocking presence of women in nature. Thorpe wrote that the woods were no place for the gentler sex, and suggested that traveling men should let the ladies out of the woods. A final complaint is reminiscent of just about any surfing movie, where a character shouts to a tourist that this place is for locals only.
This is where I want to surf, and I don't want a bunch of yo-yos getting in my way, acting stupid, acting retarded, going, hey, dude, the f*** out of my way.
There was an insistence among the purists that the wilderness belonged to a highly cultivated mind, which rejoices in the wilds of nature. These writers were dumbfounded by the sudden presence of people who have neither skill as sportsmen nor sentiment or piety enough in their composition to understand nature's solitudes. Murray wrote an article in the New York Tribune to deal with all of these critics. He said that he could not be blamed for the weather, and further, that campers had not followed his suggestions. "Is it my fault that you dressed for a Broadway play?" he asked. In this response, Murray also noted that the Adirondacks would become America's summer resort, that hotels would multiply, that the tents would gleam amid the pines. It turns out that Murray was right. Any anger over mosquitoes or rain or women or lack of hotels did not spoil the growing demand for Adirondack travel. When the summer of 1870 proved dry and warm, the region saw even more traffic. By this point, Murray was a celebrity. He spoke countless times over the next few years, expounding on the value and worth of recreation and leisure.
I'm sailing! I'm sailing! I'm sailing!
Audiences gravitated to his handsome physique, his burly muscles, and his speaking talents.
It just makes my lips numb to think about it.
They related to the story of a poor boy from the country who went to Yale with almost nothing in his pocket and spent summers in the Adirondacks. In one instance, he showed up to give a sermon still donning his hunting jacket and leaning his rifle up against the podium. Of course, much of this was for show. In the 19th century, the idea of someone showing up on stage wearing the artifacts of combat and nature would have seemed almost routine. At this time, America was getting scary. The entire country was fearful of Indian wars and rising income gaps. Crowds poured into theaters around the country to see Buffalo Bill, holding up the actual scalp of his latest victim. P.T. Barnum paraded his freaks, and it was never clear how much of this was authentic. The line between stage fiction and reality was heavily blurred. Without reliable facts, Americans began to operate on instinct. They struck paths across the Adirondacks with little more than hope. They elected celebrities to office, like Davy Crockett.
Killed him a bar when he was only 3. Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier.
Wait, is it just me, or does this guy's heart just totally not seem to be into the song?
Mr. Crockett also fed into this idea of returning to nature, a crucial element of vacation history. He was born in a mysterious place that doesn't exist on maps. The state was called Franklin. Later, it would be absorbed by Tennessee. Mr. Crockett made his living by killing bears. In other words, he was unlike any man ever elected to the government. For instance, he had no education. I had never taken any degree and did not own to any except a small degree of good sense. To push his message, Mr. Crockett understood that words would not do, so he opted for paintings. He became obsessed with his image. To get things just right, he searched for props throughout Washington City and found leather pants, a faded hunting shirt, and a pack of scurvy-looking dogs to use for his painting. In a book about his own life, Crockett argued that to obtain votes, I would therefore have to have me a large buckskin shirt made, carrying a big twist of tobacco, and in the other my bottle of liquor. Was much of this authentic to Crockett? Not really, but the image sold, and few in the audience would have taken him at his word. Fiction had so thoroughly intertwined with fact by this point that Americans trusted nothing. So, as audiences gathered to listen to Murray's tales of vacation, they would have been fascinated, yes, but also dubious. It would be a few years more before they all began to embrace his revolutionary ideas. By 1875, the Adirondacks were in full swing. There were hundreds of hotels and encampments in the mountains. There was a full-service stagecoach that shook travelers along mountain passes from the train stations. There were steamboats upon the lakes. The richest families on the East Coast, Vanderbilts, Rockefellers, constructed their own private camps away from the throng of ordinary folk. And thus was born the notion that during the summer months, people should vacate their urban lives and flock to the country. Soon, the word vacation replaced the British idea of holiday, and the idea was born.